there was something that seems to be kind of a prototypical Western civilization phenomenon the last like 50 to 75 years. I would call it the phenomena of self-help. We seem to be a place and a culture that is really pretty into self-help, whether it's the explosion of self-help TV shows like Oprah and all the like, or the plethora of self-help books that you'll find. I mean, it literally has become a category into itself if you go to a bookstore, where there ever are bookstores anymore. But you know, if there used to be bookstores, there was a whole section on self-help. And the latest big splash, albeit it's somewhat of a controversial big splash, so I'm not giving you this as this has not got my seal of approval on the book, although I think it's very interesting. But the latest big splash of a book has been a book written by a Canadian intellectual by the name of Jordan Peterson. And he wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. And it's a very interesting book, and he's a very interesting character, and it's not my job this morning to preach on that book, but I just want to kind of expose you to a little bit of it. He basically, his idea is that we run this gamut between wanting too much chaos and too much order, and kind of the answer is to live a life of meaning. And he comes up with 12 different rules that help us get meaning in our lives. The book is wildly popular amongst young men, by the way. And here are some of the rules. I'll just read them to you. I'm not going to teach on them, like I said, but they're interesting rules. Rule number 1 in his book is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Rule number 2 is to treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Rule number 4, here's compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Rule number 5 I like, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Rule number 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Rule number 9, assume, this is good for you right now, you can apply this rule. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Rule number 11, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. And rule number 12, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. They're interesting rules, and again, there's a lot more to the book and to his ideas, and there's a lot out there on him if you're interested. But I share that because I think this week in the lectionary, it sort of strikes a similar tone, because the passages that we have in the lectionary this week, all 4 of them, sort of offer to us guidance and direction. In fact, in very clear language, it sort of lays out a path for us that we should take. I'm going to just focus on 2 of the passages this morning, but what I want us to do is to understand their guidance and also understand their limits. Because unlike Jordan Peterson's 12 rules, these rules are given in a broader context, and it's both important to hear the rules and to understand the context. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it by starting with Psalm 15. Psalm 15. It says this, O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell in your holy hill? Those who walk blameless and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue, who do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. That's a powerful statement, isn't it? Talk about rules and an antidote to chaos. This psalm says if you do these things, if you follow these rules and these guidelines, you will not be moved. They paint a powerful picture. And imagine just for a second what it says. Number one, imagine not being condemned by your words. It talks a lot in that passage about slander and gossip and honesty and integrity. And imagine what it would be like for you to not be condemned by your own words. It's fascinating to think that this passage was written thousands upon thousands of years ago and is probably more true now than it ever was. More true now in the age of social media, where everything you post and say can somehow come back to get you. Remember the All-Star game this year where the pitcher that was from the state of Maryland, I forget what team he pitched for, but literally the day of he made his first All-Star game, and the day of the All-Star game, someone released old tweets and posts of his from when he was in high school that were very racially insensitive and offensive. And what would have been a crowning moment in this young athlete's life instead became a moment of shame because of his words. The psalmist clearly says that, your words are important, your words matter, and those who use their words well know how to live life. They will not be moved. And that's a very convicting thing. I came across this prayer by Tim Keller in a devotional on the Psalm 15, and it says this: "The Lord, the sins of my tongue are so many. Forgive me for talking too much out of pride, for talking too little because of fear, for not telling the truth because of pride and fear, for words that are harsh and cutting, for hurting others' reputation through gossip." Our words, if we're not careful, can create shaky ground beneath our feet. And the psalmist reminds us that the person that stands firm is a person who guards their words. But he goes on to paint even a broader picture. He says, not only do our words matter, but he says, the psalmist says, the type of person who will not be moved is the type of person who keeps their promises even when they hurt. I was thinking this week, as they were reflecting on the life of John McCain and some of the different aspects of his life. And one of the moments that they pointed out was, I'm sure many of you have seen this in the news too, but he was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he was the son of a wealthy family. And when he was shot down and taken prisoner in Vietnam, and when it was discovered that he was the son of a wealthy family, the Vietnamese powers that be, the North Vietnamese powers that be, thought to themselves, well, we could use him as a ploy, and we could release him because he's rich and keep the other prisoners and just kind of create this capitalistic inconsistency by highlighting this in American culture. So the North Vietnamese were actually prepared to release John McCain from prison, and John McCain refused to go because he had sworn an oath. He'd kept a promise to his fellow soldiers. He kept his promise even when it hurt. The psalmist says those kind of people are on solid ground. It also says that you have to be the kind of person that your personal integrity is bigger than money. You don't use money to manipulate or to try to impress others or to do things to destroy others. It says they don't lend money out at interest. And that kind of lending is different than bank lending and all that kind of stuff. But that kind of lending was often predatory lending. And they say, a righteous person doesn't do that. They don't use their money to prey on others, and they don't accept bribes to lie. They're not overly influenced by money because their integrity matters more to them than money. Imagine for a second yourself if the power that money has, and to know that your character is more significant than that. Psalm 15 says that is the kind of person that stands upon solid ground. But the lectionary doesn't stop there. It goes on in James chapter 1, which was read during worship. The picture goes even further, because one of the things that James understands is this, that in a religious context, it's very easy to talk about values. It's very easy to just do things and to talk about it. But actually, James, and we won't read this whole thing, but if you can get the next slide up there, the rest of the passage, James sort of challenges his listeners, and that would be us, to be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and on going away immediately forget what they were like. James is saying that there is a powerful truth to a well-lived life, and that is this. That powerful truth is this whole concept of obedience. I am not merely blessed by listening to or speaking about the attributes I just listed in Psalm 15. Simply hearing those things is not enough. We need to do more than hear them, James says. You're actually blessed in life by doing it. The blessing comes through obedience. It's easy to shout and yell and talk and say we must do things, but the real blessing comes when you do it. It's funny, my daughter Macy's playing in the Parkville Labor Day soccer tournament as we speak. And I've spent I was there early this morning and all day yesterday on soccer fields in Parkville. And one thing I've noticed, I've been around youth soccer for a long time, and there is a whole lot of instruction giving going on at youth soccer games, and not simply from the coaches. If you pull up near any youth soccer field, you'll hear about 10,000 parents shouting out instructions from the sidelines. And I'm one of them, okay? I'm not trying to act like I'm anybody better. But it's funny in life, that the real blessing, right, the real power isn't all of us barking out our orders. What you really want is the kids to do what they're supposed to do. That's the real blessing. The blessing isn't in talking about it. The blessing is in doing it. And it's in this little gap, it's in the gap between hearing it, saying it, and doing it, that I think the limits to self-help begin to show themselves. And it's why the context in which they're given is important. Because when it comes to rules, and when it comes to laws, and when it comes to ideas, there's a certain insufficiency to them. Very often, if we're not putting things in a broader context, we can hear rules in a way that don't work. I was thinking about how to illustrate this, and I remembered a scene from a TV show called MASH, which automatically, again, makes me old. The older I get, everything makes me old. MASH used to come on Monday nights at 9 p.m., and it was a great show about a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean War. It was funny yet serious, and it was a great scene. And I want to show you, and I know that Ed said the audio is passable on this, but hopefully it'll work. But this is a scene from the show MASH in which a unexploded bomb lands in their camp. And the two main, and these guys are all doctors, but the two main surgeons, Alan Alda's one of them, need to dismantle this bomb. And they are receiving instructions from their commander behind a well-secured area, and they're trying to dismantle this bomb and see what happens.
And carefully cut the wires leading to the clockwork fuse at the head. But first, remove the fuse.
So you know, it turned out to be a propaganda bomb, and nobody blew up in that scene. But I love that scene because, you know, here's the guy just kind of giving you the orders, right? And then all of a sudden, he tells them the order, and then but first, right? And very often, that's how life feels. We just get rules, but we lack the context. See, rules were meant to be read with someone beside you. Someone who understands life and makes provisions for your flaws. Again, I think of putting something together or learning any new skill. Very often, if you think about it, whenever you learned something new, whenever you learned and grew in character or whatever, not only was there a clear articulation of what was expected of you, but there was also someone beside you who could provide for your mistakes, who could guide you when you didn't know what to do. And not only was that person beside you, but in a way that person was also ahead of you. That person was an example of the very things that they were trying to teach. And so when you've got clear rules, clear beside you and clear people in front of you, right? That's when rules begin to take life. I mentioned earlier about the screaming soccer parents, and I am also a soccer parent, but a soccer coach. And U.S. Soccer has a whole new mantra for the way that they want soccer to be coached. And it's very interesting if you think about it, but the basic way that they want soccer to go is the kids play, you know. They play and they discover, in the course of playing, they discover their own flaws. By allowing the kids to play, what you want to be unearthed is what they can't do. And then as a coach, you begin to practice, right? Now that you've got their attention and they understand what they can't do, then you practice a certain skill that will help them. And then they go back out and they play. And that every soccer practice should have play, practice, play as part of it. And I think that's actually really insightful, because I think that in some ways the same could be true for all of us. We just talked about in Psalm 15, you know, the type of person is somebody that doesn't gossip, right? I've just elevated by even bringing up gossip and slander and cutting down people and being cruel with your tongue. Okay, who among us this week, and I'm not asking you to raise your hands or stand up, but who among us this week, as soon as I elevate the temperature for all of us and I talk about your words, who among us falls short there? Who among us can't acknowledge that we've used our words? Even prepping the sermon and this morning with my wife, I used my words in a harmful way. Life just pulls the flaws out of me as I play the game of life. And so we pull back and we come to church and we come to this place where we begin to practice things. We hear the Word of God. We hear clear instructions. We receive communion. We gather together one another. We begin to practice life in a different way that somehow helps us understand better ways to use our words. And then we go back out into life and play the game of life. That is the context in which rules were always meant to exist, and that is the very context in which Jesus delivers them. Go back to Psalm 15. In Psalm 15, it doesn't just sit there and list rules, right? It starts with a question. The question it starts with is, who is the one that can enter God's holy tent? That's the question. Well, it says someone who doesn't slander others with their words, someone who can't be manipulated by money, someone who keeps their promises even when it hurts. Well, who does that? Who did that? Jesus, right? Jesus is the one who kept his promise even when it's hurt. Jesus is the one who spoke words of truth and accuracy. Jesus is the one who was not manipulated or swayed by money. He's the one that stands beside us. Rules are great. I think Jordan Peterson's book sounds pretty interesting, and I've seen him talk, and I think it'd be worth you reading. But I guarantee you this, you're going to face a gap. And the gap is always going to come in that place of obedience, because obedience requires more than just the rule. Obedience requires someone beside you. And that is what we invite you to. It's almost like you have to say, that's the rule, and there's Jesus. Okay, now he did it. So Jesus did it, so I can try it. Jesus did it, so I don't have to prove myself by doing it. Jesus did it, and the way Jesus did it looks so life-giving to me that I want to try it. This is significant. Because this enables us both to elevate the rule and to keep it there, to look honestly at ourselves and see where we are, and to find the power we need to obey. If I had to tell you one significant change that I've experienced personally on a spiritual level over the past year, it has been learning to live this way. I have been much better able to roll with my flaws. Before I was either, and I'm still bad, I'm not trying to make myself sound better than I am, but before I would either really, really try to be good, or I just would give up or be frustrated, and I would ignore the rules altogether. And now I've learned just something different. I can maintain, I don't want to be someone whose words harm others, even when I do, but I can be honest about it, and I can grow, I can play, I can practice, I can play. And you need that too. We all do. Which brings us to communion. Because communion is sort of one of those places where we practice, right? Jesus had plenty of rules and he had plenty of instructions, but one of the most significant things Jesus did was he gave us this gift of communion. And what he did when he gave us this gift is he said, this is my body. It's broken for you. So don't try anymore to pretend that you have it all together. Don't try anymore, church, to think that you're not going to be stained by sin. In the same way, he said, this cup is the covenant of my blood spilled for you. In this cup, we have a promise. The covenant, right? The covenant, you use it to marriage. When you take this cup, what you're saying is, I'm a part of the family of God. So I'm a part of the family of Jesus Christ. So I'm no longer just defined by my flaws. I also have a way of living that I ascribe to. I want to be better. And so when we take communion, one of the things that we're practicing and saying is, Lord, I know that I'm broken, but I long to be more. Thank you for accepting me into your family, and let this identity be the thing that defines me. And so in a minute, I'm going to invite you to the table. And if you're a guest here at churchONE, we hold what we call an open table, in the sense that we believe that these elements are available for anyone who believes in their heart that Jesus died for them and that his blood was spilled for them. And they're willing to accept this as their own personal gift. We practice these things as a way of expressing our faith. And so if you're here this morning and this is maybe the first time that you're able to express your faith in this way, you're welcome. If you're here and this is the 10,000th time that you feel like you need to express your faith in this way, you are welcome. But what I want you to do is see this as a place. Understand communion as a place where we begin to meet God. And so here's what I'd ask you to do. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up, and they're going to play for us. And I'm going to ask you to just sit for a minute and ask yourself, where is there a place where I'm not obeying? Lord, where is there a place where I'm not living by the rules I long to live by? And acknowledge that to Jesus. And then when you come forward in communion, come forward in a spirit of faith, saying, Jesus, I once again receive the great gift of your death And I ask that you would begin to live your life through me so that I be able to be the person I long to be. Come to communion both as a way of emptying yourself of your guilt and filling yourself in the love and strength of God to be the one that you're longed to be. So you don't have to take long, but just allow that. And when you're ready, I'll be up here. Some of the overseers will be up here. It'd be our privilege to serve you. But let me pray for us. Jesus, I thank you so much that you call us to a meaningful life. That not only do you give rules and directions for what life should look like, but you also give us your provision for our failure and your presence in our lives. When we take these elements, this bread and this wine, we do it in a spirit of faith. This bread and this wine for us is not simply two pieces of bread and wine, but they're signs that we believe there is more that is true, that we are deeply loved, even when we're deeply flawed. Lord, may we as a church receive your grace this morning through these elements. Thank you for the gift of communion. In your name, amen. Well, I've been at this ministry thing for a while, and I get sick of my own sermons. And there's certain parts of this job that'll get old, but there are certain things that will never grow old. And moments like this morning are some of those. The faith that you display as you come forward, the meeting and the giving of yourself to Jesus Christ is an honor and it's a gift to be a part of a community of people that play the game of life, that practice their faith, and then go back out there and do it. So, churchONE, God bless you. Thank you for being here, whether it's your first time or you've been here all 5 years. It's a privilege to do faith. It's a privilege to do life with you. And may God go with you. If you need prayer, we've got prayer, people devoted to prayer. But if not, next week we're going to start a several-week series kind of coincided with what we believe is sort of a vision for what God has for us. And the series is going to be called Participate. And the idea behind it is this: you are never more fully alive than when you give yourself to something bigger than you. God has called you to participate. And we get the privilege of participating in our life of faith together. And so we look forward to unpacking that for the next few weeks with you. God bless you. Thanks for coming. We'll see you.